Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 2599 Northwest 1st Drive here in Gresham. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front of the house. We are currently just off to the right of the front doorway. We have a 3-inch ABS cleanout as our point of access. There's front door, there's your cleanout. We're going to insert the camera and check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. It sounds like water has been shut off to the house here. From the sounds of it, I don't know that any water was actually able to go down line during the home inspection. And I'm getting in here just after the home inspectors have left. The neighbor adjacent to me was nice enough to let me fill up a bucket of water. So we've at least got some water we can introduce to the line. But first thing I'm noticing here when I crack this thing open, I got flies coming out of it and quite a stench, which you'd think would be normal for sewer lines. I've been doing this 13 years and cambered 25,000 sewer lines. A smelly sewer line is usually an indication there's some kind of issue going on. A sewer line that functions even half decent, at worst, will smell like a musty, wet basement. So anyway, that or this has been sitting just with no water going through it for a very, very long time, which allows stuff to just sit and just become rather gross. So before I drop the camera all the way in here, I'm going to introduce some of the water to the line and then we'll put the rest of it down. The only other time you'll get a smell like that sometimes is if you're getting a lot of sewer gas wafting from the city main. And that usually means the city main's got some kind of issue going on with it too. Sanitary sewer lines, when they have water going through them on a frequent basis, stay remarkably clean. I wouldn't suggest eating off of one, but they generally stay like much cleaner than you would ever think they would be. Yeah, so like right here, you've got some debris that's piled up in the line. That's probably to some extent related to the kind of smell I've got here. Thus far, pretty good looking sewer line. The only spot I've seen with anything to even look at a second time is that spot there where we've got some debris hanging up in the flow line. And I apologize, I don't have my auto leveling cameras right now or in the shop. This darn fancy wireless system I have does not allow me to flip the image over. Alright, and that's the main lateral connection right there at about 50 feet out. So we're going to dump the rest of the water down the line here, let that run through. All right, while that drains off, we're going to go locate the camera head really quick, verify where the line terminates, and then we'll have a better look at everything as we come back. Alrighty, located the camera head successfully where that line hits the main, and I just pulled back just a little bit from it, mostly so I don't gunk the camera head up with a bunch of cobwebs and can't see anything. Where I located that, the main there is perfectly in line with the clean out. If you draw an imaginary straight line from the clean out to the main lateral, basically the middle of the street, that is essentially the path your line takes. Right now, we are upside down, so the flow line's actually at the top of the screen right now. Or kind of sideways anyway. That joint there is just slightly wonky. I mean, it's so minor, it's not even going on my report. That thing is just barely out of whack. And one of the nice things, unless there's something different about this neighborhood, like it's privately maintained, the city of Gresham does take responsibility for the sewer line. I believe in Gresham, it's even a little bit further back than the rest of Portland or Multnomah County. most of Portland, they take responsibility at the face of the curb. In Gresham, I believe it's at the right-of-way, so even further back. All right, so this joint here, the hard part right now is the line is really gunked up, and that joint there has settled. It is offset. It's offset in the manner that, I mean, as far as flow goes, it's not doing much. That joint there is dirty enough that it's possible what we're looking at is dirt seeping through the pipe joint. The hard part is with all the other gunk in the line right here, normally the line wouldn't be this dirty. There's just no water flow going through it. It makes it really hard to discern. And this spot right here, you got this big hunk of junk sitting in the flow line. For the most part, it just looks like some debris that's piled up right there, probably because very little water flow has been going down line. When lines are infrequently used, there's a lot more buildup that occurs. A lot of times when you're flushing a toilet, that debris is only making it partway down line. So if you have very infrequent water usage, you can get stuff that will start kind of piling up in places. So this is one where, you know, realistically, I think what you have between there is a coupler. That joint, for the most part, looks closed off to the ground. There's just enough junk packed into it, it's really hard to tell if we're looking at black rubber fern coat in between the pipe ends and there's just some gunk built up over the top of it, or if you've got dirt trying to seep through there. I'll at least locate this really quick here to see where it's at. Oh, there goes some water breaking loose there. Okay, so right now I just snapped a photo of this in case it's needed, but if you're facing the house from the street, that's how I describe everything. Right now we're running underneath the walkway that leads up to the front door. We're at the last concrete square before the walkway merges with the sidewalk. It's the square. It looks like it was poured differently than the other ones, or at a separate time. It's got a different texture to it. It's also the only square that's not a basically perfect rectangle shape. It's kind of a funky, odd-shaped piece of concrete. Anyway, we're right in the middle of that, sitting probably about 1.5 feet or so before the hitting the sidewalk edge. Anyway, it's a hard one to discern there. Realistically, I mean, again, if I haven't mentioned, I've been doing this 13 years. I've cambered about 25,000 sewer lines. Generally speaking, when a joint's like that, in modern plastic piping, usually the joint remains intact. It's pretty uncommon for a joint that's only shifted that much. That in the world of offsets and, you know, partial separations, at least it appears to be a partial separation, that is pretty small potatoes there. All right, I got one more bucket of water there going down line just to help clear that stuff out. Anyway, the best I can call it, what I'm not seeing anything obvious going on here as it relates to, you know, signs that the joint is opened up to the ground. We don't have a bunch of dirt streaks. A lot of times when joints open up to the ground, groundwater will seep in and drags dirt with it, and you'll get obvious streaking going down the sidewall. I don't see any of that going on here, really. That doesn't mean it's not potentially open to the ground. I think this has a little bit more to do with just the fact there's a bunch of gunk built up in the line. This is kind of an oddity here too. The way what that looks like by and large is a wipe, but it almost looks like there's stuff underneath it. Like you could potentially have, it's what's so hard here without constant water flow going through the line to keep the camera lens clean. And you've got a lot of bugs and stuff in the line here. That's the other thing that's a little odd. So off to the right side of the screen there, that or rats have been having a heyday in here. That thing on the right side of the screen there appears to be a living organism. You can see it moving around. What's hard to tell is if they're subterranean, something that's come through the pipe joints. Like when I at first glance, that joint almost looks like where the line's belling out to 4-inch, but you've got all that junk sitting there and it's moving. And granted, airflow does go through lines. It has to in order for things to move. And if you have something light enough, it'll move around. This is kind of a hard one here. I think what I'm going to do is recommend, granted, this is not the dirtiest line in the world. It's the way that the buildup has occurred. It's making it really hard to discern if what we're looking at here is stuff that's actually come to the pipe joint from outside, if it's subterranean bugs. Like if earthworms are crawling around, these look almost like, I can't tell if those are potato bugs or roly-polies, I mean. Earthworms will do a similar thing. If you get a big bunch of them trying to come through a joint at one spot, which I have seen before, it kind of has a similar appearance to this. Usually they move around a lot more. That thing's kind of almost looks like more it's flapping in the wind. It's just really hard to tell what the heck it is. And how it got there is the better question. This spot too, the way that that stuff is hung up there on the joint almost gives the appearance like you could have debris that built up over the top of a root intrusion, which will obscure most of the roots. It's the way that it's hanging off that thing is odd. There's almost hardly any of that white material connected to the pipe joint. Without constant water flow through here, it's hard to get this lens just absolutely perfectly clean, to get right up to it and get fine detail. And I will review this at home under better lighting conditions. It's very sunny right now, but I'm in the shade. I've got a decent view. This is one of those ones where it'd be really nice to be able to do about 10 toilet flushes just to blast all the junk out of the pipe and get a nicer view here. But you've got some spots here that are kind of questionable. It almost looks like you could have critters that are subterranean that are coming through that pipe joint. I just don't know how they would have got down line otherwise. I just located that spot. We're just barely to the right of the walkway. My locate's coming in about there. I mean, like 3 to 6 inches maybe to the right of it, and about 4 feet deep. So what I like to do on these ones, I mean, if nothing else, when water gets turned back on here, it would be ideal to just, I mean, let the water rip. I mean, let a bathtub run for a while. You could also go to the effort of hydrojetting, but realistically, with the kind of debris that's in here, this is really not hydrojet worthy. I mean, the debris you've got in here would hardly even come close to causing a blockage. It's mostly just, it's making it difficult to discern some of these spots. But if I'm not mistaken, those things look like roly-poly bugs, and I'm just trying to imagine how they got into the sewer line. It's not as uncommon when you have like basements with backflow valves in the floor and things like that, where underneath the floor hatch you've got exposed dirt, where subterranean bugs can get in that way and then weasel their way down the line either through a floor drain or something like that. But on a line like this, it's a trickier scenario for that to occur. Anyway, this is one where I would recommend, you know, as far as flow and functionality goes, again, you've got a little bit of gunk in the flow line out there just before the transition joint. That stuff's going to slough off and move on. Once you've got constant water flow through here again, that'll clear out. So I think before getting the effort of hydrojetting this thing, I think it would be worthwhile just letting a whole bunch of fixtures run in here, flush the toilets, get this thing cleared out, so you can get a better view as to what's going on there. That it might allow for a nicer shot at some of those joints to see if you can see any evidence that they're open. It's just very odd debris to see inside of a sewer line. Very odd. Especially one this new. Not quite as weird to see that in an 80-year-old clay or concrete sewer line where there's almost no chance the joints are closed off of the ground. This one, you know, you've got a couple joints in here that are slightly wonky and out of whack, but they're not so much so that they just look obviously open to the ground. It's the way that debris has built up in and around them that makes it really hard to tell. So, as far as flow goes, line has good flow to the main, but I would like to see this thing cleaner so that we can just get a better shot and view of those pipe joints.